In February 2016, David Meade prophesied a cataclysmic end for mankind. Meade claimed to have scientific data proving that a mysterious planet, Planet X, is on course to crash into us, transforming our planet into a literal hell on Earth. Meade forecast the collision to take place in late 2017. If that's true, then the next few months may be mankind's last. Research scientist and author David Meade believes that Planet X will collide with the Earth in October 2017. Meade claims that the evidence for this is overwhelming. Meade is convinced that the planet will hurtle into the South Pole and destroy all life on Earth. He calls Planet X Nibiru and says it orbits around a second sun in our solar system. The star allegedly has 7 planets and moons orbiting it. Meade says it has not been spotted by scientists yet because of the unusual angle at which it is traveling. He says that because of this anomalous trajectory, it can only be seen from high altitude above South America or the South Pole. But the gravitational pull of this imminent collision is already being felt on Earth. Meade points to the spate of unexplained volcanic eruptions throughout Japan, Indonesia, New Zealand, and Peru. He argues that these are directly caused by disruption to forces in Earth's atmosphere by Nibiru's gravity. He also says Earth's soaring temperatures and the apparent proliferation of sinkholes throughout 2016 are signs that we are feeling the impact of Planet X as it nears. Meade claims evidence for the crash stretches back millennia. He quotes passages from the Bible, like Revelation chapter 12, which describes a sign in heaven of a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and the crown of 12 stars on her head. Apparently, using complex computer modeling software, Meade showed that tracking the movements of the cosmos pinpointed the moment of this sign of stars at September 23, 2017. That date will be the first time in a century that the constellations of Serpens Ophiuchus, Leo, and Virgo align. Meade says this triumvirate is also the cosmological arrangement depicted in the 12th chapter of Revelation. It is therefore the time marker for the start of the apocalypse. According to Meade, the global elite are secretly preparing for the disaster and have constructed a series of underground bunkers to protect themselves. Unfortunately, much of the justification for Meade's argument comes from religious rather than scientific sources. Biblical verses are open to interpretation and can certainly not be taken as fact. A lot of proof for Meade's argument comes from his own visions and dreams. Indeed, he admits that he used the Bible to find the date of the apocalypse, which in turn prompted his investigations into Planet X. The logic of his theory is circular. Moreover, scientific bodies refute Meade's claims as outlandish and preposterous. In response to online hysteria over these doomsday predictions, NASA issued a sobering statement. They said, "Stories about wayward planets are an internet hoax. There is no factual basis for these claims. If Planet X were real and headed for an encounter with the Earth, astronomers would have been tracking it for at least the past decade, and it would be visible by now to the naked eye." Meanwhile, the unusual natural phenomena that Meade claims are proof of disrupted atmospheric forces have much simpler and proven earthly causes. The global heat waves that made 2016 the hottest year on record have now been accounted for by climate change accelerated by man-made pollution. The sinkholes are the result of permafrost melting due to global warming, and the volcanic eruptions have the usual scientific explanations. It is also not the first time the hypothetical planet Nibiru has been expected to crash into Earth. Previous forecasts claimed Planet X would destroy us in 2003, 2012, and 2015. Given that each of these predictions failed to come true, the likelihood of Meade being accurate is very low. Nevertheless, it is striking that NASA have just confirmed the existence of a solar system merely 39 light-years away from our own. TRAPPIST-1 consists of a star and 7 planets orbiting around it. Although it is tempting to draw parallels between this newly discovered solar system and Meade's theory, we must remember that 39 light-years is very far away. Meade's apocalyptic vision is frightening to consider. However, his theory lacks the necessary scientific evidence to make it plausible. If Planet X or Nibiru even exists, there's no reason to believe it will destroy Earth.
Brown dwarf star. Now, the object, which is clearly Planet X by deductive logic process of elimination, is therefore now between Mars and Jupiter. It's not in the outer reaches of the solar system. It can clearly be seen, especially from the southern hemisphere.
The implications and the side effects of what might happen to us here on Earth is pretty scary. We're going to get into some of that. Now, one of the cool things that David discusses with us here is instead of having to just take his word for it, he gives you coordinates on where you can actually see it for yourself. Mid-2017, he says we're going to see an eclipse with Nibiru. He has been able to take his background and transition it into research on Planet X, and has recently compiled an awesome book with a treasure trove of information. David, how the heck are you?
Very good tonight, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate you coming on here with us. I know that you had reached out to us a few weeks ago. You've got a really cool book coming up here that's going to break everything down with Nibiru. You know, let's talk about what you do.
Well, the way I got into it, I've always believed in following the money. About 5 years ago, I got into some research on the Pentagon black budget. And I don't know if you recall, but you probably do, that the day before 9/11, Don Rumsfeld announced at a Pentagon news conference that the agency was 2.2 trillion short. Money was simply missing, 2.2, not billion, but trillion. So having worked for a period of time at the Pentagon, I realized this was most likely black budget funds. And I did some investigation, and I ran across a couple of areas, basically the deep underground military base research done by Jesse Ventura, done by Phil Schneider, done by other personalities. And I realized, of course, that's likely the source of the lost money. It's black budget ops, and it's being spent. And why is it being spent in terms of these type of bases? So that's how my curiosity was picked, you might say. These bases, I understand, are built away primarily from geologic tectonic areas, but again, when Planet X passes, you're going to have new geotectonic faults established when you have force 11, 12, 13, 14 earthquakes. So I don't know how safe they're going to be. It could be a lost investment for those people. In any case, that was my basic introduction about 5 years ago, and then I got into the science of the topic. My understanding, and this is partly from Phil Schneider, I know he worked 11 years at Groom Lake Area 51. He says the black budget varies between 0.2 trillion and 1.2 trillion per year. I'm not sure when the inception started. It was absolutely going on in the late 70s and 80s. He says a couple of dozen of these may be reasonable for protection. I agree, nuclear protection. But the question is, why do we have over 130 of these? That doesn't really make any sense unless, obviously, Planet X is absolutely a fact, which it is.
Well, so, 4 years ago, I remember reading an article on Yahoo News that claimed eventually people are going to be able to look up in the sky and they're going to see what looks like a second sun, but really it's a giant sun that exploded. I think they said it was Betelgeuse or something like that. So in my mind, when I read stuff like that in the news, I think it's, the forces behind the scenes or whoever's kind of orchestrating the media prepping people, subconsciously getting them ready for this type of event. First, it's just an explosion that looks like a sun, and then, hey, oh, it is a sun. So, do you have any physical evidence, like pictures that you can say without a shadow of a doubt, or files or white papers?
Yes, I do. In fact, there's some very good videos on the internet itself that are good photographic analysis. There's one called Multiple Suns Rise Over Halifax, Nova Scotia. Those are the keywords that a person would enter on YouTube to read it or view it. And you can see the sun. And then at the 3 o'clock position, you have planet X. To the right of planet X, you have a separate lens flare. Now, that doesn't reflect the lens flare, of course, in the water below, but planet X is generating its own light, and you can see its reflection, therefore, in the water below. Next, I think a fog bank moves in, and it obscures the sun, but planet X is still visible. A lens flare cannot do this. Now, that's one good example of something they could simply look up themselves on YouTube. There's also some good Davis Station South Pole videos out there. And there's, in my book, which is Planet X, The Arrival in 2017 by David Mead on Amazon, I've done a video. It's on page 15 or 16 or so of the book. And I have a section called Photographic Analysis of Planet X. And I study one video which another analyst did an extensive study on. And let me just sort of explain what happened. A fellow named Glenn Vaughn on April 11th, 2015, was flying down the Pacific side of Central America. He's a professor, an ex-professor at California University. He took a 20 megapixel raw file with a Sony digital camera, and he confirmed the report by sending it in to a particular analyst for review. He took it through an aircraft window. Now, an analysis of the metadata indicated it was taken at 240 dpi, very high resolution, and the metadata further showed the date, the time, the GPS coordinates. I think it was a Sony DSC HX50V camera. In any case, using Starry Night Professional version, the video, which is referenced in my book and which is on YouTube, did a field of view analysis, and he determined Mercury is above, in other words, superior conjunction with the sun, and the object in the field of view, therefore, is not Mercury. Mercury does not have wings, as does this object, and Mercury does not have the brightness or contrast of the unknown object. Now, the analyst also performed a gamma test on a paint program. Gamma testing shows if an object is hot or cold. Hot objects generate, of course, their own light like our sun. A lens flare would be a cold object. They read direct light, they don't generate it. So he started with a gamma of 1, reducing it by steps. At point 10, the gamma illustrates stark differences. At point 01, he shows the hottest, brightest objects on the video. He then reduced brightness to a value, I think, of -3 in contrast to +2. The hot objects fade in together, proving they're genuine. Then he ran a luminance test to determine the intensity of the object, and he determined it was behind the sun, not a reflection. There are actually wings on the object, which is clearly behind the sun. Now, he stated this is deeply disturbing. The reason is that gas tails of comets follow solar winds, and they're not visible until the comet's orbit is inside of Jupiter, at which point, normally the luminosity at that point of the sun makes the tails of the comet or the planet visible. Of course, planet X, we all call it planet X or Niburu, but it is a dwarf star. It's either a red dwarf or a brown dwarf star. Now, the object, which is clearly planet X by deductive logic and process elimination, is therefore now between Mars and Jupiter. It's not in the outer reaches of the solar system. It can clearly be seen, especially from the southern hemisphere. Now, as of April 2015, therefore, the date of that video and the analysis, Niburu is close enough to the sun so that the sun's light is reflected to the tail, making it appearing like wings. And there's one other quick comment I'd make, because actually that video had 2 parts. The second part was a lady who lives near where I do, Sanibel Island, Florida, Melissa Huffman. Now, you can look at this video itself on YouTube. I think it has more or less gone viral, and nearly 1 million people have looked at it. And this is a 2015 video. The object is very interesting. She pans the sky and shows the object, and then the moon. Now, it's clearly a planet visible just north of the sun. Now, using stellarium and knowing the moon phases, comparing it to her video on the moon, you can go to the derived date, take away the atmosphere and the ocean, and you can determine the relationship of the stars to the horizon. So to determine the date, you basically just use moon charts, and the moon is well below the horizon in all dates after September 26, 2015. Therefore, the video was taken earlier. Now, September 2015 moon phases give us a comparable to the moon in the video. And if you look at the moon phases diagram to the actual picture of the moon, it has to have been photographed on September 23rd, 2015, based on moon phasing. Now, on that date, Mercury in stellarium is very dim, somewhat above the horizon. Also, I believe it's in a different location than the unknown object. All other planets are below the horizon. The video, therefore, conclusively and plainly shows an unidentified planet, or dwarf star, planet X, of some significant magnitude quite clearly. So I can reach no other conclusion, and the analyst did himself, than this is a rare photo from this hemisphere of Planet X approaching us.
Wow. You know, and there's also speculation now, and I hadn't heard this until about a year ago, that not only is Planet X going to come our way, this dwarf star, but also a bunch of planets with it, like it's bringing in its own solar system. Is there evidence or truth to that?
Right. There's a number of videos there. I've seen some real good ones from the South Pole Telescope, and they indicate that there are a variety of moons around this. It's basically, as you say, it's its own solar system. A lot of people don't realize this, but binary, what we've got in our solar system here is obviously a binary twin. 76%, this is a fact, of all stars are binary twins. In fact, 16% are trinary twins. There are three suns, but ours has a binary companion, and it comes under the name of Planet X, Niburu, and so forth, Nemesis. There are various names to it. But ours has a binary twin, and it's very common. It's extremely common, and it's basically what is approaching us. And apparently, from all descriptions, indications, reports, insider reports, photographs, and other sources of human and signal intelligence, it contains 5 to 7 moons around it. So it's a solar system approaching our solar system, which makes it extremely dangerous. The red dragon of Revelation 12 may well be, and I believe rather obviously is, Planet X, as is referred to in an earlier chapter of Revelation, I think Revelation chapter 8, in a similar manner. A colleague of mine at the university, one university in the western U.S., brought up a very interesting point, perhaps to cover up to my attention. Here it is. Basically, he said, the areas of the dragon anomaly have been covered or patched up by Google Sky in the past. But one of the ways to actually see what is behind this patched out area is to use a program called Skyview by NASA. Skyview, what that is, it's a virtual observatory on the net. It generates images of any part of the sky from wavelengths of all regimes, radio to gamma. You just filter it. Now, when you view these images in various filters, you can see the actual color of this anomaly in Virgo is red, and it does look very menacing, as it appears to have a face like a dragon with 2 profound eyes. It's very intriguing and quite strange. Now, just for your listeners, I'll provide very briefly the right ascension and declination if they want to go to Skyview. And here it is. Just cut and paste this coordinate. Here's the right ascension, 13 hours, 50 minutes, 44 seconds. Here's the declination, and that would be minus 8 hours, 13 minutes and 59.7 seconds. So right ascension is the celestial equivalent of longitude, and in the sky, latitude is called declination. So you just enter those coordinates, and then on Skyview you just choose the Iris 100 micron telescope setting, and there you are. You've never seen an object quite like this one. Now, the sign itself might be a sweeping parenthetic of that entire biblical 70th week of Daniel, which is a key to solving the most complex cryptogram in existence, the Book of the Apocalypse. As to what it is, the astronomical scientific community, I think, is keeping a very low profile. And the question is, why did they ever cover it up to begin with?
Well, and not only that, if we could get into some of the more scientific stuff as well.
Because it's so close now, it's different. When it was first observed, probably the first time it was actually observed, it was observed in the infrared spectrum in 1983 by a orbiting Earth satellite telescope called the Infrared Astronomical Satellite. And this is when all those articles appeared in the Washington Post and the New York Times and so forth. And that's when, right before blackout occurred, there were some articles over a 6 to 12 month period of time when it was pretty much spoken freely of. And then all of a sudden, I think they realized the seriousness of the matter, and they went ahead and produced a blackout. Now, remember this, the blue daytime sky is going to hide Planet X until it eclipses the sun. But there is going to be a full disk solar eclipse right after September 23rd, 2017. This occurs, if you look at moon charts, on October 5th, 2017. And what happens, of course, during a full disk solar eclipse is the sky turns black, and that will reveal at that point, that week, in my opinion, the week of October 5th to 12th, according, if the book of Revelation is true, because this ties in perfectly with it, that could well be the exact month that we can first see it with the naked eye. So, in my opinion, combined with a predictive computer-generated astronomical model, the Bible, the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, tells us that the red dragon, or Planet X, or Niburu, appears after September 23rd, 17, but it has to appear before October 11th, 2017. At that date, October 11th, 2017, the sign in Virgo, the woman Virgo, will no longer be, quote, pregnant. Then the red dragon, or Planet X, therefore must make it an appearance before October 11th. So that seems to be a cutoff date. Jupiter, which is known as the planet or the star of the Messiah, exits Virgo, the Virgin, on October 11th, after having spent, I believe, 301 days, or about 42 weeks, in the, quote, womb region of that constellation. And again, after that point, the woman will no longer be pregnant. So that gives us a very narrow window, just to use the book of Revelation or the Apocalypse as sort of an intel briefing. And the great sign of the woman, is described in Revelation 12, 1-2, forms and lasts for a few hours. And according, again, to astronomical models, this sign has never before occurred in human history. It will occur once on September 23rd, 27. It will never occur again. And I believe it places us right at the time frame from that analysis of the Planet X approach to the Earth. I would prepare on or before the fall of 2017. I would conduct emergency preparedness. Of course, you want to be spiritually ready. You want to have a clear conscience and all that, but you need to do physical preparations as well. I think survival gear, emergency food, that sort of thing. And the reason is that, again, all this while, you're going to get increasing levels of disinformation from the mass media until it's actually there. And then they're going to say, whoops, we didn't have any notice, we don't know what happened, and so forth. And they're going to run and hide in what they've already established. But, you know, the public is there, and the public has to fend for itself. This global warming, as you've heard, I'm sure, is a cover story. The Earth is heating up from the core outward because of the approach of Planet X. During the 20th century, I think there were 35 volcanic eruptions in a typical year. Now there are more than 35 of these every single day. So basically, when X approaches, that week you see it in the sky, let's say it's October of 2017, you know, for purposes of discussion, at that point, it's not going to actually collide, I don't believe, with the Earth. The Earth is only 8,000 miles in diameter. It may pass 5, 10, 15 million miles away, but it has a very high magnetic attraction. It's going to have a gravitronic effect. It's going to cause the shifting of the Earth's crust. It's going to cause major volcanic activity. It's going to cause tidal waves. And when a pole shift happens, the ocean literally comes up out of its basin. So you're going to have major weather changes, seismic activity, and volcanic eruptions. Probably at that point, Yellowstone, the Yellowstone super caldera, will likely erupt. That could affect up to a third of the United States, cover it with ash.
Well, let me jump in here for a second. I'm glad you brought that up, because you can clearly tell a difference now with how hot the sun is. I mean, even if you look at the same temperature, you know, 75 degrees now versus 75 degrees 10 years ago, although it's the same temperature, the sun on your skin even, there's just more heat there.
If you go to the book of Revelation, the Revelation indicates that the sun is going to be hotter at that time frame. Now, the EMP effect, Planet X has a massive tail. It's fantastically charged. It's magnetic. The tail has moons and rocks in it. Now, this can down aircraft and satellite when it passes. It can affect the electrical grid. Now, of course, NASA, JPL, and the other disinformation sources ignore this data. But here are the facts. The Earth has a nickel and iron core. Now, this generates its magnetic field. However, the magnetosphere has large holes in it. The magnetosphere is a static shield. Now, under routine solar conditions, it protects the Earth from coronal mass ejections. But when Planet X arrives, we're no longer under routine solar conditions. Now, you know that the magnetic poles have been shifting towards Russia at maybe 40 miles an hour a year. But when Planet X arrives, the physical poles will shift. Now, this will create some hyper-earthquakes, tsunamis, and the shifting of land masses. So if you want to look at a few different states, one thing people can do to protect themselves is simply be in the right location when it happens. Now, there's a few states to avoid. And California is highly dangerous. It's composed of rock plates. Now, when rock is compressed, it breaks. And you'll see the crumbling of rock, of course, as its mass goes upwards. Now, the West Coast will have major catastrophic changes, synergistic proportions, tidal waves, high hurricane force winds, earthquakes on the fault lines, volcanic activity over the magma. So it's highly dangerous. And I think the long-term danger is in riding out the shifts for those who are living near the boundaries of plates. Now, cities without mountains as a backdrop can just be washed out to sea. You'll have broken gas and water lines. San Francisco, it's on the San Andreas and other fault lines. A lot of the population will be trapped. Water will overflow the city. Survival will be minimal. California is not a good bet. Now, the area around Arizona, on the other hand, the Hoover Dam probably won't survive because of earthquake activity. And you'll have rivers flooding, and areas within rivers should probably be avoided. But you look at Phoenix and some of these main cities. Arizona has withstood many a pole shift. The area around Tucson is safe. Florida is another very dangerous state. Its highest elevation is 105 meters in the Panhandle. But as for Central and South Florida and the Keys, these parts can be devastated by a tide of water. Colorado, for example, is a safe area. The domestic division of the CIA is relocating to Colorado. That should give viewers many clues right there. And of course, one of the safest parts of the country is the Ozarks, northern Arkansas, southern Missouri, average elevation close to 1,000 feet, self-sufficient water supply, agricultural land. They'll do well. They're also isolated from large metropolitan areas, and they're well enough inland to avoid flooding through, tidal waves. So it's part of the preparation is probably geographic. But I would expect when it hits, when you see this object in the sky, you'll have 1 to 2 days to accumulate all of the emergency food and water you can. I would accumulate at least a 3-month supply. I would highly recommend people educate themselves, understand the whole picture, and probably take action at that.
In the 12th chapter of Revelation. It is therefore the time marker for the start of the apocalypse. According to Mead, the global elite are secretly preparing for the disaster and have constructed a series of underground bunkers to protect themselves. Unfortunately, much of the justification for Mead's argument comes from religious rather than scientific sources. Biblical verses are open to interpretation and can certainly not be taken as fact. A lot of proof for Mead's argument comes from his own visions and dreams. He quotes passages from the Bible, like Revelation chapter 12, which describes a sign in heaven of a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and the crown of 12 stars on her head. Apparently, using complex computer modeling software, Mead showed that tracking the movements of the cosmos pinpointed the moment of this sign of stars at September the 23rd, 2017. That date will be the first time in a century that the constellations of Serpens Ophiuchus, Leo and Virgo align. Mead says this triumvirate is also the cosmological arrangement depicted. In February 2016, David Mead prophesied a cataclysmic end for mankind. Mead claimed to have scientific data proving that a mysterious planet, Planet X, is on course to crash into us, transforming our planet into a literal hell on Earth. Mead forecast the collision to take place in late 2017. If that's true, then the next few months may be mankind's last. Research scientist and author David Mead believes that Planet X will collide with the Earth in October 2017. Mead claims that the evidence for this is overwhelming. Mead is convinced that the planet will hurtle into the South Pole and destroy all life on Earth. He calls Planet X Nibiru and says it orbits around a second sun in our solar system. The star allegedly has 7 planets and moons orbiting it. Mead says it has not been spotted by scientists yet because of the unusual angle at which it is traveling. He says that because of this anomalous trajectory, it can only be seen from high altitude above South America or the South Pole. But the gravitational pull of this imminent collision is already being felt on Earth. Mead points to the spate of unexplained volcanic eruptions throughout Japan, Indonesia, New Zealand and Peru. He argues that these are directly caused by disruption to forces in Earth's atmosphere by Nibiru's gravity. He also says Earth's soaring temperatures and the apparent proliferation of sinkholes throughout 2016 are signs that we are feeling the impact of Planet X as it nears. Mead claims evidence for the crash stretches back millennia.